In this video, I'm going to show you how to add a beautiful shore and water line to your mountain oil painting using the Bob Ross wet on wet technique. On my palette, I have about a Hershey's Kiss worth of mountain mix. I have about a chocolate chip size worth of Prussian blue. I have about a chocolate chip size of titanium white. I have 2 chocolate chips worth of Indian yellow. I have a Hershey Kiss size lump of cadmium yellow and about 1.5 size Hershey Kisses of sap green. I also have my liquid white handy because we're going to need that to thin down the paint when we go to the bushes. For now, what we're going to do is we're going to start from the back and work our way forward. I'm using a number 6 fan brush. This is one of the larger Bob Ross fan brushes. And first I'm going to just take the fan brush and run it through the mountain mix. And what I'm doing when I'm mixing in this mountain mix is I'm pulling the fan brush through the paint, and then I also like to wiggle it back and forth. When you're placing your tree line, you want to make sure that you don't cover up all of this really nice foothill area that is where your fog and your smoother snow is. You want to come down a little bit so that the top of your shore trees are just underneath that foggy area. You want to be able to see that coming through. I'm just using the tip of the fan brush and I'm just making some downward motions while varying the height and also varying the pressure. When you push a little bit harder using your fan brush, you're going to get more paint deposit on the canvas. If you push a little bit lighter, you're going to get less. And I think that just really helps make the trees look more realistic because they're not all exactly the same. And you're going to have some that are farther away, which are the lighter ones, and you're going to have some that are closer, which are these darker ones. Now that we have our tree line in, I'm going to put that fan brush down and I'm going to swap it out for a 2-inch landscape brush. And this brush has a little bit of paint residue on it from when I was painting in these mountains in a previous video. And that's okay. I'm not going to put any paint thinner on this. I'm not going to take the time to clean out the brush. If you have a perfectly clean brush, use that one. This is just the one that I happen to have sitting around and it's already got a little bit of paint on it. So I'm going to use it. And what you want to do is you want to go to about the midway point of your tree line and you just want to pull straight down. And what this is going to begin to do is give you a reflection of these trees in the water. Isn't that really amazing? What a great technique. And then if you need to clean your brush off every so often, go ahead and just wipe it on a paper towel. Next, I'm going to come back with that same 2-inch brush, no additional paint on it, and I'm just going to drag it across in a horizontal fashion. Again, wiping off that excess paint. I want this brush dry. And I can blend this through. Now that we have our tree line and our reflection in the water, I'm going to go back to the palette. I have switched out for my palette knife. And I'm just going to take a little bit of that white, the titanium white. I'm going to push it flat. And I want to dirty it up a little bit. So I'm going to take just a smidge of that Indian yellow. Blend it all together. And that's going to give us this nice marble look. And I'm just going to take a tiny little roll of paint. And then when I come to the canvas, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just lightly touch to indicate where the shoreline might be. And this is just going to help differentiate the trees from the water line. And if you like, you could even come in and blend those. I have nothing on the palette knife now. It's a totally dry palette knife. I'm just pushing pushing the paint into the canvas, basically just to get rid of any obvious marks from the palette knife. There we go. And you also want to make sure that your line is really level. It just adds just a hint of detail there that I think makes a big difference. Okay, next I'm going to put the palette knife down. I'm going to switch out for a 1-inch oval brush. This brush is fantastic for doing bushes because, as you can see by the shape of the brush, the bristles are actually shaped like the top of a bush. So what I'm going to do for this is I'm going to take the brush and I'm going to dip it in just the slightest amount of liquid white. Oops, here we go. Liquid white, okay? So I'm just taking my brush, and you can't see it because it's a little slightly off camera, and I'm just dipping the very corner, the very edge of the brush into the liquid white. So I have about that much liquid white on it. I'm gonna go back up to my palette, and let's do green bushes first. So I'm gonna pull that through that sap green, and I'm letting the liquid white and the green mix together, and I don't need it to be a solid color, that's okay. I like to see the striations in there. And I'm gonna pull it down, and then I'm gonna push up. And when you push up on your palette, you'll start to see that the paint starts to begin to take the form of the top of a bush right there on your palette. I'm also looking at the paint on the brush and making sure that it's not super clumpy on there, that I can see the bristles still through all of the paint. So I'm going to take that brush, I'm going to come up to our tree line, and I'm just going to start to put some indications of where some bushes might be. And if you need more paint, go back and reload, doing that same push up to get that little ridge of paint. Make sure that it's not clumping on the brush. And then just put the indications of some bushes there. Maybe a little bit more liquid white. Going back to my green. Pushing up on the palette. I really want to see that lacy effect on the palette. I'm letting the shape of the brush determine the shape of those bushes. Okay, I think that looks really nice so far. And next, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clean that off onto my paper towel. Again, I'm not adding any paint thinner, and I'm not taking the time to stop and clean the brush. I'm going to go back to the liquid white, and now I'm going to go through the cadmium yellow and the Indian yellow, both at the same time. And I'm letting that marble up on the palette, and I'm going to push the brush and get that little ridge of paint, making sure that it's not clumped together on the brush. Then I'm just going to fill in where I think some Indian yellow and some cad yellow bushes might be in our painting. Back to the palette, reload, push up. Sometimes with this Bob Ross wet on wet technique, what you see on the palette is just as important as what you see on your painting. Okay, I think that looks pretty nice. Next, what I want to do is I want to pull down some of these reflections. So I'm just going to add a little bit of this paint onto my water line. Then I'm going to go back to my 2-inch landscape brush, make sure that there's nothing on there that I don't want. And I'm just going to slightly grab some of our bush color, where our foliage is, and pull that down into the water. Also, just like we did our tree line. It's very slight, very subtle, but you can definitely see it. And then go back straight across again. And that gives really nice reflection in the water of that foliage and tree line. So from here, I'm going to go back up to my waterline color, and I want to put some waterline that is more in the front. So I'm just piling up that white and the Indian yellow back onto my palette. I'm pulling it flat. I'm just using the long edge of the knife, cut off a little roll of paint, and now I'm going to start to come forward with my waterline a bit. And now that I look at it, I think that this painting would look really nice with some white reflections of the water. So I'm going to go clean palette knife, and I'm going to dip it back into the liquid white. I'm just taking the corner of that palette knife and dipping just a slight amount. And I'm just going to give myself a little pile of liquid white on the palette. So now I've got that pile of liquid white on the palette, and I'm going to pull that flat and get a little roll of paint on there, just a slight amount. And then I'm going to come out into the pond and holding the knife very flat, very horizontal, I'm just going to start to cut in some water reflections. Okay, so I've got some of those water reflections in. Now I'm going to go back to a very clean 1-inch brush. There's nothing on here. It's very, very clean. And I'm just going to blend the edges of those water lines just to soften them down just a little bit. And that's how you paint a shoreline and waterline on a mountain oil painting. I hope you liked this video. If you did, make sure that you give it a thumbs up and subscribe so that you don't miss next week's video.